So we'll get going. I'm Eric Derby. I work in development and land access at the Food Shed Alliance. The Food Shed Alliance is a nonprofit that works with food farming and the environment. We work with programs that help farmers gain access to land access. We help, we collect food, we glean food from farms, and we deliver that to food pantries and programs that help people in need. We also have a watershed program in the Paulin-Skill watershed in Warren and Sussex counties that works with farms as well to certify river-friendly farm practices. Tonight, we're featuring Abeni Ramsey from City Girl Farm, and she's going to be talking about crop production. Abeni is the owner of City Girl Farm and is a farm tenant of our land access program called Sustainable Agriculture Enterprise, SAGE. And I'm going to let Abeni kick it off.
Hi,
Thanks,
everyone. Hi, everyone. As Eric shared, my name is Abeni Ramsey. I'm originally from California, but I have been living in New Jersey for 3 years now. I'm a graduate of UC Davis School of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences in Davis, California, and I have been farming for approximately 20 years at different scales, in different places, and growing different crops. So I am super excited to be participating in this webinar. And if you have any questions or you want any additional information, feel free to put information in the chat. And yeah, we'll Eric, let me know when we're ready to share screen and take it away.
Yeah, you can go ahead, Abeni. Thank you.
Okay. So let me go ahead and share my screen. For some reason, Eric, I'm not getting anybody on my view but you. Let me go back. Stop screen share. Right. And for some reason, give me 1 second, everyone. Let me make sure I get the right screen for everyone. I just had my presentation up and now it has disappeared on me. All right, let me stop screen sharing. Give me 1 moment. I don't know why it just went away. There it is. Eric, just give me a minute. I don't know when. Oh, there it is. Are you all able to see that? Eric?
Can't see it yet.
Okay. All right. Let me try to do the screen share again. You got it now?
There you go. Yeah.
All right. Great.
Awesome.
I tell you, this class by Zoom is really something different. So we are going to be talking about crop planning, and this is going to be spread over, I think, 3 different sessions, 2 virtual and 1 in person. So my approach to crop planning is really to think about a few different things, not just about what I want to grow and like making a table with these crops, but really to think about my overall business, my vision and goals, who I'm growing for, and then looking at my resources, right? So yeah, I could take on 5 different restaurants and 7 different markets, but I have to think, am I interested in growing for the general public? Am I interested in just growing for my family and my neighbors? Am I interested in just growing for my community? And then beyond just who I want to grow for, but also what are my resources with respect to land? How much land do I have access to? How much labor? How many people are there that I can either hire or engage in my business to help me achieve my goals? And then how much capital do I have? Because, things cost. And so we have to be mindful of how much money we have available or we want to activate for our project. And then there are other things that we have to consider beyond just vision and goals, but those things that we control and those things that we completely don't control. So some of those variables are just climatic conditions. Things that we don't control are maybe the slope of our land or the soil type or the ability for it to drain. But things that we do control are maybe our schedule, how often we want to be outside and engage in our garden or on our farm. We also can control how many customers or how many individuals we serve. So these are things that some things are constant and we just have to accept that that's the way it is and then plan around it. And then some things are more variable that we can use to scale up or scale down our operation or to mitigate for some of those things that are constants that we can't really control. And then the last thing that we'll talk about over the course is how do you maintain what you've built? And then also, how do you plan for expansion? So maybe you're starting on a really small plot of land, but your vision and goal is to be much larger, or you are starting by just supplying produce to your friends and family, but one day you want to sell to restaurants or you want to supply a community co-op. And so how do you plan for scaling and how do you plan for expanding your operation? Does anybody have any questions about any of that at this point? I'm still not really able to view anyone but you, Eric, but please, I guess, put it in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions. So, talking again a little bit, just looking at how we're putting these buckets together is learning to define those goals, understanding your customers and your choices for customers, and then how to define the resources, right? How to think about what are the limiting factors with respect to land, labor, and capital, and then what ideas can we come up with to be able to plan or scale for those things. Understanding the work required. I really think it's important to understand the tasks that we have before us and to really set those up and map them against the season so you know when you have to do which tasks, what the order is, and how you can utilize your resources, how you can utilize labor, how you can utilize capital at different parts of your workflow to maximize your efficiency and increase the likelihood that you will reach your goals. Another thing that it's important to do in the beginning in the planning process is to assess your site conditions and to be mindful of that and how that impacts your tasks. And then this is the third piece we'll really do, I think, in the in-person is how to map out your site and understanding also what data you're going to collect. Because as we talk about that growth and expansion piece, it's important that you track information and that you know what part of your physical space you have used to do what. So when you're thinking about scaling, you'll know, okay, I ended up using 15 or 20 square feet for my storage shed, for my tools and other equipment. And so if I'm going to scale up, I'm going to need twice as much of storage space. Or if I'm going to take on a larger site, what's the cost going to be associated with the storage or increasing number of beds, training employees, all of that thing. So we will talk about defining those goals. So when looking at your goals, you need to think about like who am I growing for, right? Am I growing for my own personal consumption? Am I trying to be like a small scale market farm where I'm going to just take my produce and sell it at the farmer's market? Um, do I want to, do I have some limitations on capital and cash flow? And so maybe I want to do a community supported agricultural model that allows me to get some upfront cash by selling subscriptions so that I can get my my operation up and going, and then how many subscriptions do I want to sell? Or maybe you are really ready to scale up, or you've been doing this for a while and you want to think about wholesale clients. That would be restaurants or small stores, something like that. So considering your market, right? So that's, again, who will I sell to? Assessing your resources, looking at your space, because that's going to greatly define how you can approach these goals, whether these are short-term or long-term goals, things that you need to build towards, or things that you can do right away. And then understanding how to define your cultivation space, understanding if you're working with acreage, if you're working in small fields or blocks of beds or just a single bed, because maybe you're just working in your backyard. And again, it's taking all of this information that we do through this planning and thought process and then making decisions based on that information. So mapping the tasks against your seasonal timeline, understanding the order in which activities need to be done, and then again, looking at those available resources and mapping that out. So in the beginning of the season, right now, a lot of times people are like figuring out what markets they're going to be selling at. Maybe they're lining customers up and then trying to connect with labor or individuals who can come and work in the farm or work on the project to get those tasks done. Another thing that you have to do, because it's going to greatly impact your crop plan and your seeding schedule, is really walking your site and understanding your the land that you're working with, even if it's a garden bed, right? So over the winter, maybe there's been some erosion in your garden bed and it started full at the top and now it's greatly compressed or decreased over the winter months and over last growing season. So really taking an assessment of that soil and seeing what it needs. Do I need to top it with compost? Do I need to get more potting soil? Has it compressed a lot and now I need to maybe get some elements that'll help aeration, like vermiculite or perlite? And then also assessing your hardiness zone. I know that all of us in New Jersey are in 7A or 7B, but maybe you are a little further north or you're a little further south. And so really understanding how the local climate is going to affect when and what you can grow. Drainage. So I happen to have a part of my land that is sloped. And so I always have to think about like, where is this water coming from? How is it going to flow on the land? What is that going to do to my soil? And then working to slow the flow of water. And so that's going to be often the orientation of your beds, whether you decide to, on that slope, stack your rows really close or stack them further, depending on what that grade is. Wind is another issue that you need to think about. I am the farm manager, I'm the director of urban ag for the Greater Newark Conservancy, in addition to owning and operating my own farm project. And at Hawthorne Avenue Farm in Newark, we have a lot of westerly wind that comes through during the season. So we have developed wind breaks. We're thinking about what crops can handle that wind and what crops cannot. So really just sort of mapping out where you can and can't grow certain things. Again, those variables and constants that you have to keep in mind when going through this planning process. And then there are like, how many beds do you have? how many rows you have. Are you going to do blocks of beds? Are you going to do single rows? And then I always start the season with a soil test. So I understand what I'm dealing with, and what my nutritional load is in the soil, what my carbon load is in the soil, what my deficiencies may be, what my pH is, and then I can make those modifications to my conditions as required. Then I am then scheduling and calculations, right? And so that's what we're really going to get into today. Some people like to develop a spreadsheet. There are also a lot of tools that you can use online that will help you do some of this calculation and data collection. I think it's really important to keep crop plans year after year because it helps you sort of know what you did before, what worked, what didn't work, what you may want to change, what you want to keep. Sales are really important to look at, or if you're not actually selling, but you're simply distributing to the community, what worked, what people liked, what people asked for. At market, even if I don't have things and people come by and they may pick up one or two things, and I'll ask, hey, was there anything that you were interested in or you were looking for that we didn't have today? So I can track that information and use that to inform my choices next year. So then you also need to determine your total planting area, right? So that goes to some of those limiting factors that we talked about earlier. So maybe I do have a full acre to work, but I only have 3 people or 2 people who can come onto the farm to help me with seeding, cultivating, maintaining, harvesting, washing, and packing, right? And sales. And so that's a lot of activity. So maybe even though I have an acre, I want to pare that down to a 1/4 acre or an 1/8 of an acre so that I can match my production with the help that I have to get that job done. And then the converse is also an option, right? So I may have an acre and I have plenty of labor and help, so then I can plant out that full acre, but I also want to make sure I have sales channels or distribution channels for that level of production, and that I have the capital necessary to invest in that larger scale production. So really thinking about all that information, right? So that's determining your budget, how much money do you have to spend, and the total amount of labor that you have to help you get the job done. Are there any questions about any of that? All right, I will move along. All right, so assessing your available capital. That can be just cash flow that you have, savings that you have that you want to invest. There are also opportunities for grants, especially if you are a small farmer. Then there are also options, like I mentioned earlier, of selling subscriptions, doing a CSA model that would offer you the opportunity to get some upfront capital to invest, right? And use that for funding labor and your expenses. Then if we're talking about one of the principal ways that I think about bringing money into my business, grants help you sort of in the front end or when you are just beginning to start your work, but customers, right? So a lot of what I focus on is market-based solutions. So actually selling to market, that may be restaurants, CSAs, farmers markets or farm stands. So I let my customers' needs, that demand side, determine how much I'm going to plant. Because I'm thinking about planting and developing my crop plan as a way of servicing those customers. And so for restaurants, sometimes you will have, small orders. Maybe it's just a few crops, carrots, lettuce, leeks, and onions. and you're going to do 2 cases of those a week for that restaurant client. Markets, you tend to need a little more crop diversity to really build out your market stall and to make it interesting and engaging for folks shopping at the market. And because you don't want to run out, you tend to bring more units of each crop type to the market. So maybe you're doing 4 cases per week if you're doing one market, and then you're going to have, 7, 8, 9 different crops that you bring to that market, versus a CSA that you have a little more control over. The CSA, you kind of plant a good diversity over a longer period of time so that each CSA box gets a little something different. I like to think of it that I'm always going to give folks what I call kind of workhorse crops, or things that people buy every time they go to the grocery store. So maybe bell peppers, onions, carrots, some other kind of squash or fruiting crop. In addition to carrots, maybe it's some other root veg, maybe it's beets one week, maybe it's turnips, and then having a good diversity of leafy greens. And then something that folks can use as the base for a salad. Maybe it's arugula, maybe it's lettuce, maybe it's a spring mix. So really thinking about who your customer is, what their needs might be, in the development of, or in the assessment of like the customer's needs and how that's going to inform your crop plan. Then we talked again about your space, right? So then you have to define your space and understand your space. This will help with the information that you're going to need to actually put together this crop plan. So this is what is called a management unit. So like, what is the overall area that I'm thinking about? And so on a medium-sized farm, that can be your field. And maybe your field is 200 feet by 150 feet. And you've got that space that you've determined you're going to grow your crops in. Maybe you're a small farm, and so it's like a block of beds. And maybe your beds are 50-foot long by 3 to 4 feet wide, and that's kind of like your block of space that you're going to grow your crops for your small farm operation. Or maybe it's just a garden, your backyard garden, your community garden, and you're looking at a single bed. And so you want to try to get as much diversity you have in, maybe let's call it a 4x8 amount of space. And so that's your overall management unit, and you express it as your growing space in, as I said, your rows, and then the actual width of that bed, so that you can determine the linear bed foot and the row footage. So how many rows may go in your single garden bed? Can you get 4 rows? Can you get 3 rows? And a lot of that is going to be determined by what you actually grow in the bed. So if I'm growing leafy greens, they're going to need more space around them. You're going to be able to put less rows of those in your garden box, versus if I'm doing carrots or radish, where I can get more rows within that amount of space. So also trying to standardize it. So I go into some gardens sometimes, and folks will have like a planter bed that maybe one is 8 feet by 4 feet, and then another one is 3 feet by 2 feet, or another one is 3 feet by 10 feet. It's going to be harder to make really easy and precise calculations, because now I'm going to have to calculate what I can put in each of those beds based on different dimensions. So on my farm, I try to do multiples of 100, because most of the yield calculations come by 100 feet. So I'll do a 100-foot run, or I'll do a 50-foot run. And even when I'm consulting in the garden spaces, I encourage people to, either have a 5-foot long bed or a 10-foot long bed, but trying to have it so it's some easy multiple of that 100, right? Or some easy multiple of 5. So it's easy for me to take a yield for 100 feet and pare it down to my 5 or 10-foot bed. So I can still use these yield calculations that you can easily find on Johnny's or in many books and apply them to my space to understand how to calculate my yield. Does anybody have any questions about how to calculate yield, or anyone have anything to add about their growing space? Can I get an idea of who's growing in a medium-sized farm and who is doing more of a garden situation? Anybody want to volunteer any information about their space?
Sure, I can.
Okay.
I am just starting out my farm, and I have 3 acres total, but I also have my house on it. So I have about, this will be my 3rd season, but my first season actually trying to like generate income from it
Mm-hmm.
because I work full time. I
Mm-hmm.
have an orchard, so I have about 400 fruit trees in, and
Nice.
also I want to say we have about 40 garden beds.
Nice.
So right now we have a couple beds that are full of garlic, and we have some stuff from perennials, and then lettuce that overwintered. But
Have
that's the
you
space. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
have you already come up with some ideas of who your customers are and where you want to sell your produce?
So the fruit trees have only been in for like 4 years. They're like, so they were bought, but they're not like producing a lot of fruit yet. We only have a couple that are producing a lot of fruit right now.
Okay.
Uh, So I think so last year we had a, like an overabundance, and we like gave some away, and we shared some, and we froze a lot,
Mm-hmm.
pears mainly. But I was thinking, I know there's a lot of people that are going to like the flea markets and setting up like the the tables and different things like that. So I was thinking, I live on a busy road, so maybe just trying to see what a farm stand would look like on a property. But
Nice.
I'm still figuring it out. That's why I'm here in class.
Are you in New Jersey?
Yes, I am. I'm in Winslow Township, so in Hamilton, New Jersey,
And which county is that?
Camden County.
Camden County?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you have a wonderful resource because fruit sells at a premium price. So
Okay.
definitely connecting with Food Shed Alliance and through aggregation with other farmers, it's an opportunity to access markets. So for instance, one of my customers for my farm is the New Jersey Food Bank. And they always want fruit. I won't have any for any tree fruit on my farm. I'm going to do some strawberries and some blueberries, but working with other farmers who may have access to markets, either farmers markets or customers, is a great way to be able to sort of begin to enter into selling to customers and to larger customers, and then for us as farmers to work together to get more diversity at market and to share the cost of actually selling at farmers markets. So another one of my customers for this season is I'll be selling at Duke Farm Farmers Market, the Suffolk County Farmers Market. And it's not cheap to get a space in the market. So the more that we as farmers can support each other and small farmers can support each other, I think it will help to grow our operations and help us all work to get experience working with different types of customers. So thank you so much for sharing. Do you have any
Sure.
follow-up questions?
So I had a question earlier when I was driving. So
Okay.
you had mentioned that even if you have like access to, you said even if you have access to a full acre, you would not necessarily want to plant out a full acre if you didn't have either the market for it or the like employees for it to help you. And that's what I have ran into in the past. Like every year we plant out, like my family and I, we plant out a lot.
Yeah.
And then we end up needing help. And then it's like you have to pay for help, but then we were like basically paying for help but not generating income. So how many people do you think when it comes to like an acre?
I would not, I mean, and this is how I think about it, because it kind of depends on how you manage your farm, right? So that's why I think it's really important to chart the tasks and to understand how many hours it takes to do specific tasks. And you can figure out how long it takes just by like, one, tracking data, but let's say you harvest, I don't know, one bed of lettuce, and you take the time to wash that, to harvest that lettuce, to cool it in the field, and then you track that time. That's one task, harvesting and field cooling. Then you need to wash that lettuce. So then you have other tasks to wash, to pack it, to dry it, and then to case pack it. So that's another set of tasks. And you determine how much time that would be and how many people are involved in that activity. So you're literally looking at what are all the tasks that I have to do throughout the cycle of the season and the cycle of the day, and how many people it takes to do X number of units. So then if I know, okay, just for my garden bed, and this is why standardizing your units is very important. So I know if I'm doing 4 foot by 10 foot, and to seed that and to weed that and to fertilize that and to do crop management on that. So that would be spraying, covering, spreading, amendments, whatever. And then to harvest that and to wash and pack that. And then let's leave selling that as an off to the side. And that's easier for me to tell you how many people it takes to manage a farm stand, right? So these are all of your discrete tasks that you have to think about. So let me just go see if I can go back to this section. Okay. This is where we talked about your timeline, right? And understanding what tasks you need to do. So if I know for 4 by 10, it takes me X amount of time to do those activities for that amount of space. So if I think that I'm going to double that space or triple that space, it's going to be double the amount of time required. And that doesn't mean that, like, yeah, to maintain my 4 by 10, to weed it and to cover it and to plant it, maybe that takes me an hour. But if I'm going to do 100 times that space, it could take me, if I'm still using the same type of labor, it could take me 100 hours to do that. Do you see what I'm saying? And then we know, okay, it's going to take me 100 hours. I can't work people in the field more than on average, well, legally, 8 hours to 7 hours. So I'm going to need X amount of that. 100 hours divided by 7 hours tells me how many people I'm going to need to do those activities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that kind of tells me that this year I really need to keep up with the data because I haven't in the past. It's more like been like recreational, and then like,
Right.
okay, we're growing a lot of food, we need to be selling some, but
Right.
to actually keep track of that data so I would have the information to move forward.
Right. And then it's also talking with other farmers, right? So I have a friend that's got a farm up in the Hudson Valley, and they do a CSA. They don't supply restaurants, but they're on 10 acres. And so I will call them and say, like I called them the other day because I have a restaurant client that just reached out to me, and I'm like, what is the standard pricing for a case of X, Y, and Z for high-end restaurants? They were like, I'm not selling to high-end restaurants, but I got a friend who is. So then I called them. So it's also that information sharing and not feeling any way at all. Like, there's no pride in this for me. It's all about getting the job done and making sure I'm not wasting resources and I'm not wasting food, which is a resource, right? So I will call somebody up and ask them if I don't know, or if it would take you an entire season to track that information, connecting with other farmers and asking them, okay, so how many people are on your staff for this, that, and the other activity, so that you can get yourself started, but then of course tracking your data and information against those averages. And then knowing when you're going to have to implement technology to help reduce labor, because in addition to labor being a resource, capital is a resource. So you may not have enough money coming in at the beginning of the season to carry all of those labor costs until you make your first sale. So maybe I found that at Hawthorne Avenue last season, we were working 2.5 acres and probably had under cultivation 1.5 acres because I put some of it as fallow, and it was 2 of us. And at some point when we are out there on our knees hand transplanting, I was like, this is not going to work. And I went and I looked and I was like, I need a transplanter for small scale cultivation. And in my farm experience, all the transplanters I've ever worked with are tractor hitch transplanters. So you literally have a tractor pulling you, you're sitting on the back and you're dropping transplants into the machine and it's putting them in the soil. And I was like, well, we don't have a tractor. There's got to be some other solution. And that's when I learned about the paper pot transplanter, which is a small machine. It is human powered. You put a flat of transplants in this paper chain pot, and it allows you to pull it along your soil, and it will drop the transplants and cover them up. It'll make the furrow, drop the transplants and cover them up for you. And it reduced the time for us to plant 100 feet with 2 people, and that would take us 1.5 hours, and it reduced it to 20 minutes and 1 person.
Wow, yeah, that's great.
Right? So, but I almost had to see the problem and then have the limiting factor of I can't hire any more people. It's just me and this one other person. And then your wheels start to turn to try to find solutions and efficiencies so that you can make it happen, so you can reach your goal. Anybody else? Hi, Charmaine. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good. So we're talking about, I'm just sort of fielding questions about some of the things that we've talked about. So resources and how you understand how resources are opportunities or limiting factors with respect to your goals for your space. Understanding your space itself and the size requirements and limitations. And then who are our customers and how are people thinking about customers and finding customers? So I would love to hear from anyone else on the call before we move on to the next section to see if you have any questions or want to share more information about your project. No one? Well, Charmaine, I'm going to pick on you because I know that you have garden beds. So I want to, because you have a highly productive farm, and could you share with us how you think about your space and your customers, like who you serve?
Hi everyone. I'm not too sure who's on the call, but my name is Charmaine LaFortune. I am the founder of Giving 110. It's an urban garden in the city of Newark, and we have about 12 to 15 beds. You could find us on Instagram. Our production is basically, we grow food to donate to the community, and about 85 to 95% of the food that we grow goes directly to the community for free, because we're trying to reduce food insecurity. So last year we changed our beds from the wooden beds to the metal Vigo beds, which are taller beds, because we're trying to make it more accessible for people with gardening challenges and accessibility to come into the space and not having to bend too low or, maneuver between tightly closed beds. So, and the things that we grow, we start off with cool season crops. Like now we're going to start seeds, and then we move over to warm season crops. So like I said, everything that we grow, most of the food is donated. So we don't really have a selling mechanism, but we're trying to move to selling our produce that we grow, because we grow a lot of food, almost 67,000 pounds of food per garden season, and incorporated in the City of Newark CSA program this year. So we're expanding our growing space to another garden space that has allowed us to grow food there. So that garden is going to be completely new. It's a virgin state because it doesn't really have the infrastructure that we have at Giving 1/10, and it's going to be challenging and also exciting, just expanding how much food that we grow. So if you have questions, you could send me questions on Instagram, or you could ask them now, specific questions.
I heard that you're going to have a pop-up market there, a mobile pop-up farm
Yes.
stand every Thursday.
So our pop-up market is in conjunction with I just had a blank.
With me, Charmaine, Greater
With
Newark
Abeni. Oh my God, Greater Newark Conservancy. So this is something we're looking forward for, and like I said, our mission at Giving 1/10 is to decrease food insecurity. So this will be really helpful for our neighborhood to source fresh produce, because that was a challenge that I had when I moved to the city of Newark. They didn't have Whole Foods, they didn't have ShopRite. I never understood where people bought food, because I would go back to my old neighborhood to go to the grocery store, and then they put a name to it, food insecurity. So yay, we love volunteers. This Saturday we're going to have a volunteer session. We're going to open the garden up. We have a lot of work to do. I was just walking the space today. Not a lot of work. It's just, we have a lot of harvesting, because we have greens in the bed. We have some bok choy to harvest, some tulsi. There's a lot of greens and herbs to be harvested, and then we're gonna remove all those after we've harvested and donated, and just get the beds ready for planting again. So this pop-up market, like, I'm really excited about it, because this is gonna bring a whole different variety of food that our neighborhood may not be accustomed to. But one of the things that we actually do cooking demos in the garden space, where we teach people how to prepare the meals with the food that we grow. And we also take feedback from the neighborhood to see what are the things that they would like to eat, because we have a very wide variety of cosmopolitan people within our neighborhoods. We have a lot of Africans, Nigerians, Haitians, Americans, West Indians. So we try to plant things that they love, and they're really excited because of the variety of food that we grow within our space.
Nice.
And I will write in the chat. I don't want to take over Abeni's class. I'm sorry.
Okay, Charmaine, you can.
What our garden Instagram pages, so you can follow us and get information about us. Thank you.
Wonderful. So that's an example for Nalani. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes, I heard her say food. I heard her talk about the fruit, and I'm
Yes,
like,
that's
okay,
an
I have to
example
network.
of-
Yes,
That's an
definitely.
example of how through a strong small growers network, we
Yeah.
can work to get access to markets and to people, right? So even if you're not looking to necessarily make a profit, but you just don't want the food to go to waste, there's definitely a network to distribute the food in New Jersey, and we're working through creating these alliances to make that network really stronger, so that we're all knit together and we can communicate, share information, share knowledge, share experiences, and share food. We do a lot of propagation of seeds at the Conservancy, and then distribute those around to folks in the community. And seed sharing is another wonderful way for us as farmers and gardeners and growers to collaborate and share resources. All right. Anyone have
Awesome.
anything else to say about their goals or their resources or any other questions? For informational resources, I will provide a set of links to Eric that he can distribute to the group, and I'll try to put some stuff in the chat so you guys can know where to go to get some of these calculators that I'm going to introduce you to. So we've talked about our customers, determining those needs, understanding our resources and how to mitigate some of the limitations, and then how to capitalize on some of the strengths and benefits. So let's talk about, and then we talked about the defining your growing space. So understanding how, like, what management unit are we dealing with, and then how we express that within the growing space. And that's about, and then trying to unitize and have a standard unit for our bed foot and our row foot. So when we're talking about a standard unit, that's going to be, you know, whether those garden beds are all 4 feet wide or all 3 feet 5 inches wide, or whatever your standard unit is, making all of those the same, right? So when Charmaine was talking about getting these new beds that she got, all of those beautiful metal container beds are all about the same size. And so then you can know that, okay, if I need to get 100 feet of carrots to yield 150 pounds every 70 days, you know, every days to maturity, then I'm going to need X number of my garden beds to achieve that number, or I'm going to need X amount of my field to achieve that number, or blocks of my beds at my small farm to achieve that number. So I hope that makes sense. So this is a screenshot of what, again, that means, right? So if you are in a row where it's only a single row per bed, that's going to be 100 feet is your bed feet, and 100 feet is also your row feet, right? But if I have 3 rows in a bed, then each one of my bed feet is 100, and my total number of row feet is 300. So I have 300 linear feet of crop in this bed. Does that make sense to people? You can just, by show of hands, want to make sure that that translates visually for everyone. Okay. All right, great. All right, so then step 2, once you've kind of decided, all right, this is my customer, I know who I'm selling to, now I'm gonna aggregate all of my customers. Oh, I'm sorry, you guys, I see a typo on my presentation. I'm gonna aggregate all of my customers, so my restaurant clients, my CSA clients, my farmers markets clients, and I'm going to put the total volume that they are requiring together, right? So I'm going to determine how much yield for each crop type when I pull together all of my different, and I'll not call them customers, my different distribution channels. So for instance, in Charmaine's case, Charmaine's not selling, Charmaine's giving it away. So it's not sales, but it's still how many different places am I distributing food? How many different people do I need to produce for? And Nalani says, you know, I'm not necessarily selling or distributing. It's just my family. Okay, well, how much does each person that you have in your family unit or in your community want to have of each crop type? And then that's how you're going to make your plan. So determining your order volumes and your delivery schedule, like how often do I need to deliver this produce to people? How often am I distributing? How often am I having my pop-up farm stand? And then understanding how much you have to plant to get that volume, that yield, and what is my harvest period? So harvest period is something that's a little different. It is how long that crop once it is mature, can remain in the field before it is no longer good. So I'm using carrots as an example throughout this presentation. So for instance, the harvest period for carrots is about 3 weeks. It can be slightly longer if you're doing baby carrots first. So sometimes I will plant carrots out at a really close spacing so that I can go through and thin and get all the baby carrots for restaurants. Sometimes people will buy baby carrots at the market, but they're usually for restaurants. And then that'll be maybe a week or a week and a half before my mature carrots are ready. And then after my mature carrots are ready, I can harvest that volume for 3 weeks. So, and then after you sort of get that information together, you're going to be mapping your planting plan to your planting space to determine how much space you need and the required number of plants. So that's why it's really important to understand, okay, how much of my total area am I actually going to plant? And then having it in really easy to calculate discrete units so that you can easily determine the number of seeds or the number of transplants you need to plant in your defined area in order to get the total yield that you want, the total number of finished crop units that you want to serve your community, your customers, yourself. All right? So we're going to go through a calculation example. And again, like I said, I used carrots as my example. So imagine that you have a restaurant customer who needs 2 cases of carrots per week. A case is 25 pounds. And so they need 2 cases. So that's going to be 50 pounds of carrots per week. Now we're going to have to look at a table. I'm going to give you guys a table that lists the yield of direct seeded carrots. So I'm going to put that let's see if I can pull that up for you guys. Give me 1 second to change my screen sharing so I can show you what that looks like. Bear with me. I hope I don't have a problem getting back to my screen share. Let's see if I can pull this up for you all. Nope, that is not it. Sorry. I was doing some seed ordering today, so you guys will have to excuse me. Well, I'll pull the direct seeding chart up for you a little bit later, but take my word for it. 100 linear feet of carrots, which is about 3,000 carrot seeds, will yield you 150 pounds of carrots in 70 days. So 70 days is the days to maturity for carrots on average. It can be 50, sometimes it can be 90, but we're going to use sort of the sweet spot of 70 days. And so I know that for my first planting, I need to plant 70 days before I need to deliver my first harvest to my customer or my community or my family. But I also know that I have to plant out for this customer I have that needs 150 pounds of carrots a week. I have to plant out at least 100 linear feet. I mean, excuse me, needs 50 pounds of carrots a week. I'm going to need to plant out at least 100 linear feet so that over that 3-week harvest period, I can pull from the ground 50 pounds of carrots to deliver to my customer. Okay, so that's going to be my harvest period of 3 weeks, my yield per 100 feet, and the total amount that I need to deliver to my customer each week of that harvest period. So how can I take this information and modify it if I have a smaller unit besides 100 linear feet? And that goes back to the explanation of why it's important to standardize those units, because then I can take that 100 linear feet, I know it's 150 pounds, and I can now divide that 150 pounds to determine if I only had 10 feet, what my yield would be for carrots. Okay, does anyone have any questions about that? All right. Okay, so then that talks about how do I calculate how much I need to plant, or how much linear space, how much space within my garden I need to plant to achieve my goals for yield. Now I need to know how many seeds I need, right? So I gave you a little hint in the last slide that to do 100 linear feet, I need 3,000 carrots. But that's only for one planting. So I need to know for my crops how many times I need to plant, how long I'm going to grow it in the season, and how long it takes for it to harvest. So how many successions or how many intervals that I need to plant over time. So now that you know what you're growing, right, you have to determine the total number of seeds. So there's a nice little tool. This you can find on Johnny's, and it is their seed calculator. So you need to know what your crop is. You need to know whether you are going to transplant or direct seed that crop. And next class, next week, we'll go a little more, we'll delve a little deeper into just understanding the crops, when you should plant them, how long they take to mature, how you develop your crop plan over the arc of the season. But now, if you're just doing a seed calculator so you can buy all of your seed that you'll need for the season, then you just need to know, am I going to direct seed this, or am I going to transplant it? And one of the reasons is because you will have some loss, let's call it, in the process of both direct seeding and transplanting, and sometimes more in transplanting than you do in direct seeding. So you sometimes have to increase the total number of seeds that you need to purchase. And then again, this question of how many feet or how many row feet am I going to plant? How many linear feet and how many rows over am I going to plant of this crop, so that it can calculate for you the total number of seeds that you will need to plant. And so that's if you're going to do single rows. If you're doing multiple rows, this is the option 2 that allows you to say what's the space and what's the total number of rows and what is the length of rows. So it will give you a simple version and a more complex version to use in this seed calculator. Is everyone familiar with Johnny's Select Seeds? Or is there anyone who is not familiar or has never used Johnny's Select Seeds?
Yeah, I use them. I order my strawberry starts from them. This was my first year ordering 1,000.
Wow.
In the
Nice.
past, the price is so affordable. So they came highly recommended.
They have really great consistency. I will say that in the past, Johnny's didn't have a lot of really visually interesting crops. They had sort of your standard orange carrot and, your Easter egg radish, but recently I've noticed they're really stepping their game up for really interesting looking plants. Because I am really focused on the farmers markets and restaurants, I'm always looking for crops that have high visual interest. So I'm often gawking at the Fedco catalog or the Baker Creek Seed catalog. True Love Seeds is really a great resource if you're looking for seeds that are heirloom seeds and have a lot of cultural relevance for Black and brown communities. True Love Seeds is great. Does anybody have any other seed companies that they like to use? Does anyone have any suggestions? Nobody? All right. So I'll also put in the chat some seed companies that I think have really interesting seeds. One of the challenge of some of the smaller seed companies is they don't do large volume of seed. So at Johnny's and even Row 7 is now doing, you can get thousands of seeds at a time. With Baker Creek, they really are like a packet of seeds for most of them. So you'll have to buy multiple packets in order to get the numbers that you need. But because some of those crops are so specialized and specialty crops, I often will use them for like peppers or squash or tomatoes, where you don't need as many seeds, even if you have a really large space. Can you guys share with me? I know Nalani, you do fruit and you're doing strawberries this year, but Charmaine and is that Joelle? What are some of your favorite crops to grow?
For me, it's bitter melon, just because of the health benefits of growing it. And it's a vegetable that I grew up eating in Trinidad. So that's one of my prized vegetable. We do have strawberries, blueberries at the garden. We used to have raspberries, but I got rid of those, and because they had thorns, and it was getting too big for the space, because our space is not as big as, so I try to contain what we're growing in smaller bushes than, things that trellis and take over. So those are the few things that I like to grow.
Wonderful. You know, I saw bitter melon growing at your space, and I must admit, I have never had bitter melon before. So I'm looking forward to doing a cooking demo so I can try your bitter melon. What's your favorite bitter melon recipe?
Everything.
What
Usually
does
I
it
cook
taste
most
like?
things sauteed with garlic and onions, and I know you could stuff it. Some people stuff it with ground beef after and steam it. There's so many ways you could cook it. People curry it. It's a taste to get used to if you're not accustomed eating things that are bitter. But I mean, that's what we grew up eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner sometimes.
I love it.
And it goes good with curry. So,
You said it is good with curry?
yes. So,
Yes.
yeah.
I like curries. I like radicchio, and I've been trying to convert people. And I like broccoli rabe. Those are my two favorite vegetables.
Yes, I
Both
love that broccoli
are bitter. So I've been trying to convert people to bitter vegetable lovers.
So, peace everyone. I'm Jewel. I am a lay midwife. I'm not growing anything yet. I was planning to have a few beds over at one of the loud spaces. So I'm just here learning. I don't really have much to share. I'm just trying to take it all in.
Hey, Jewel, I didn't know it was you.
Yeah, it's me.
I
It's
know
me,
you
baby.
too. You should have.
I'm just here trying to learn from you
Potted
master
fresh.
educators, So I'm just, being quiet, being a student.
Ah, wonderful. I like interactive, or else I get tired of hearing the drone of my own voice.
Well, what I had in mind was I was thinking of like beets and stuff, or maybe dandelion, just thinking of supporting birthing families when they're dealing with like iron deficiency and things, or even infertility support, like what foods can support that with cleansing, and just so I wasn't really sure, I'm just trying to learn and see what I can grow, what foods to grow together.
Yes.
To promote that type of, wellness. And because my late midwife is always centered around that experience, right? And even lactation too. So like growing foods that would promote lactation. So I have to learn like what can I have in the beds that can be beneficial for those needs.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And Jewel, you should check out the citybloom.org website, the
Okay.
Conservancy website, and look for the Plot It Fresh application, because we still have some garden beds available.
Okay.
And
Thanks a
so
lot.
in addition to the beds at Bilal's space, you
Mhm.
can get a bed at Plot It Fresh.
I was thinking of maybe just having another separate, and thank you for that suggestion, just all herbs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so whether it's like red raspberry or just whatever, mother's wort for, I'm a womb practitioner too, so I think of those needs as well. So that might work out. So thank you.
Yeah, and it's great I'm so happy you guys are engaging and talking, because, you know, we all approach production growing differently. I tend to be like market farm, I'm taking it, I'm selling it, because I've raised my 3 children basically through farming. So I'm always trying to make a buck. But working in, I started my career in food security in California, and then transitioned to just being a private farm owner. So it's really helpful to hear what motivates each of you, so that I can think about that in how I tailor the course and the suggestions I make and the topics that I focus on. This presentation is really the nuts, bolts, and screws of just calculating how many units you need and how much yield. But then there's all kinds of other more nuanced approaches that talk about interplanting, talk about different ways that you can use the space to maximize production in your garden. So maybe it is growing carrots next to onions, because the onions are going to help to keep carrot flies away, and it also helps to utilize that space in between each one of your rows. Thinking about how you can edge your boxes, maybe with things that flow like nasturtium or chamomile, or things that or borage, or things that maybe you can even plant along the base of your garden bed that are going to hold moisture, like clover. So getting to know a bit about each one of you helps me to tailor the lesson in the course, so that I'm addressing and engaging the topics that you're interested in. So I thank you for sharing. And maybe at the end of this, we can have a little bit of a session where we talk about what are the things that you hope to gain, and I can prepare that information for the next session if there's any of it that I don't touch on in this session. All right. So then again, calculating quantity, going back to my nuts, bolts, and screws and my math, I love to be able to collect data and then to be able to quantify information. So I'm big into like getting the numbers. So deciding on your unit measurement, we talked about that, and understanding the activities, what activities need to happen in order within that space. So the site prep, and then the seeding, and then the planting. So again, understanding those roles, choosing your crop and planting method. So even once you've ordered your seeds, you need to know, am I direct seeding or am I transplanting? And then, as we talked about earlier, how are you actually doing that work, right? You can direct seed by hand, simply by casting the seeds or using a dibbler and dropping seeds in the soil. You can use technology like a Jang seeder, which allows you to have a machine that you walk down the row, and it's going to actually dibble or press into the soil, put the seed into the hole, and then close the soil over it. So that's a huge labor saving and time saving tool. I was at a conference, the PASA conference, I think it was this year. It was held in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and they had a Jang seeder which would do 4 or 5 rows at a time, and it blew my mind, because we've got to, sometimes on my beds, we've got to do 3, 4, 5 passes with that single seeder, and the idea that now I can make one pass perfectly spaced with this machine. And I now can calculate, okay, how much labor, how much time does that save? How much does that decrease my cost? And is that worth me investing that money in that machine versus investing that money and hiring more labor or spending more time myself in the field doing that task? So just really, it's really important to understand those tasks that you have to get done throughout the season to decide how you're going to use your time and your resources. Then, in order to calculate the quantity of seed, again, understanding the number of plantings. So when Jewel is talking about putting herbs in the box, sometimes you plant those herbs and it's just about maintaining them, and you don't necessarily have to reseed them every year. So maybe they're self-seeding, and that can be on the scale of a garden box, or that can be on the scale of a larger square footage, like Nalani, who may have an acre, and maybe you find a really great customer, or you're working with an acupuncturist, or you're working with midwives, and you want to do a eighth of an acre of mugwort, or you want to put in red raspberry for the red raspberry leaves, and you're not necessarily worried about the fruit, you just need the leaves. So in that instance, you might only be putting in one planting cycle every 2 years. You know, maybe that mugwort can be really vigorous for 2 years, and then you're going to have to replant it. So really thinking about what is required for the crop type that you have. So I was telling you all about my land and how a section of it is sloped. So on that slope, to slow the flow of water, to not have to work on the slope all the time, to hold the soil in place, I'm going to be doing perennials on the steepest part of the grade, or at the highest point of the grade. And so I'm doing artichoke, I'm doing blueberry, I'm doing rhubarb. And so I'm probably only going to have to plant those crops like once during the time that I'm, within my lease, because people are a little skeptical about my idea of the artichoke. In California, artichoke is a perennial. I'm crossing my fingers that the ground won't freeze and that I'll be able to keep them as perennials in New Jersey. But definitely for the rhubarb and for the blueberry, they are going to come back year after year, and I'll just have to prune them and fertilize them and keep them protected, but I'm not going to have to plant them every year. So, right. So when I'm thinking about the number of blueberry bushes I need, or number of rhubarb crowns I need, I'm only going to have to think about enough for that single planting. And that's versus the carrots and the scallions that I'm putting in for my restaurant orders, where I'm going to have to put those in every 3 weeks. I'm going to be seeding new carrots, and every 14 days, I'm going to be putting in new green onions, because their cycle to maturity is much shorter, and I need to get more cycles of them and more intervals of them, because I've got orders every week for those crops. And then there are some where it's not single planting and then you're done. It's maybe single planting for the season, and that an example of that would be peppers, eggplant, tomatoes, peas and beans, where you put it in, it grows as an annual, but you're harvesting the fruit. So you may be harvesting more than once, but you're only going to be planting once per season. So now we're talking about actually getting this planting schedule moving forward. So we've aggregated our needs. Now we've got to decide, okay, when are we going to plant? So understanding your hardiness zone and when your last frost is and your first frost is going to determine when you can put certain crops in the ground, and when you're going to have your last harvest for certain crops. So I'm going to ask some of my my seasoned growers on the call to give me their interpretation and how do they plan around last frost and first frost. Nalani, Charmaine, have either of you had any experience with having to plan around the last frost and the first frost? Okay, well, I take that as a no. So when you're talking about the last frost, that is the last time that it is likely, based on years and years of data collection, that is the date that in zone 7, and I believe specifically zone 7B, it is likely to drop below the frost point or drop below freezing. And so there are certain crops that are what are called frost hardy. Many of the leafy greens like collards, kale, cabbage, broccoli, even turnips. Like I had some turnips that were able to frost and thaw, that it can drop below freezing, or they will not get damaged. They won't get damaged by frost. And so some of those you can put out before April, but they probably will grow really, really slowly in the ground. But after April 15th, you can feel free to put those in the ground without any agribon or any frost protection, and they will do well and be able to sustain themselves. The general rule in our area for putting out really tender crops or non-frost hardy crops is May 1st, and that's going to be tomatoes, peppers, squash, all of that stuff, because they have a certain temperature that they need in order to have vigorous and healthy growth. And then the first frost is the point at which, in the transition from fall into winter, the point at which the temperature is most likely to drop to or below the frost point in the year. So for me, that doesn't necessarily mean that I've got to get everything out of the ground. I definitely am trying to get my tomatoes and my peppers and my squash out of the ground unless I'm growing them in a hoop house. But definitely, even for your frost hardy crops, you want to start putting frost protection over those crops so that those that will get damaged during frost are protected. So last year, to all of the growers that were part of the Newark Growers Food Box, we distributed agribon or frost protectant fabric or material to drape over crops that we had in the ground that we wanted to hold for a longer period during the fall and winter. Is anyone familiar with agribon or with any other frost protecting material?
Agribon is the only thing I've used over the years.
And how did that work for you this season?
Pretty good. We planted some winter greens in October, and I had them covered all winter, and they're perfect. I should have harvested them a long time ago, but I traveled, and I'm gonna harvest them this weekend. They stayed perfect all winter.
It's really nice, right?
Yes.
So, yeah. I also put my Russian red kale under agribon and turnips, 2 types of turnips, kohlrabi, rutabagas, lettuce, beets, broccoli rabe, spinach, and radicchio. And all of those we just now are taking the agribon off, and they're just taking off. The only thing that I had to add a little fertilizer to, I just used some fish emulsion, was the spinach. The ground got a little cold for the spinach to be able to access the fertility in the ground. But I'm pulling up purple turnips right now, and we will probably be some of the first to market with these crops because we were able to hold some of our stuff in the field over the winter months. And being the first one to have things at the farmer's market is a huge benefit. Or being able to extend your CSA from 24 weeks to 30 weeks, that's $25 a week over the total number of CSA subscriptions that you have to sell that you're getting that you wouldn't get if you didn't have a harvest until June. I was able, when I went to meet with this restaurant client, I was able to bring some produce, and he was blown away that he would be able to get produce from me almost all year round. And I think that that might have been what sealed the deal. So being able to have access to produce when others don't in your area, and for it to still be local. Sometimes people have access, but that stuff is coming up from Virginia or Florida or other places. But to be local and to have produce available in the down season is a huge benefit and a huge plus for sales, and also for access for the community, right? So if they're coming to your farm stand and we only can service them from June to September, what are their options for the other times of the year? But if we're able to use season extension and to understand how to use tools to increase our growing season, then people have access for a longer period of time to the resources that we have. Also, Nalani, you can use these season extension methods and crop protection methods for growing strawberries. So being able to put strawberries under cover is going to allow you to hold them in the field a little bit longer.
So in the past, what we've done is we just cover them really with leaves. This will be our third year having them. We're just like upscaling this year, so that's why I bought so many, but they come back each year. I have covered them with straw before, but the extra time that it takes to then remove the straw and to quickly remove the straw, because sometimes straw has a little seed in it, and then you have to, like, it takes extra labor. But I mean, New Jersey, I guess our zone 7A now is pretty strong when it comes to strawberries. So, I haven't had to do a lot of covering.
If you're finding that the labor involved in covering with using straw as your insulator is a limiting factor, you might really like to use the row cover, because you set up hoops. It's a little bit of cost, but it costs for the bales, right? For the straw bales, and you can only use them once. But with the row cover, you set up your wire frame, and I use bricks to weight it, but you can use sandbags. They have clips that you can use. And then you're simply gonna anchor that fabric over your metal frames. And then to take it off, you just knock the weights off. So I hold on one end, and then I have the person in the field with me walk down the row to the other end. And as they're walking, they're just popping the weights off along the way down. And then we work together to lift that fabric over the frame. We take the weight closest to us and hold the fabric down while we go work the bed. And then we just repeat it over again. Take the weights off that are anchoring either point. We pull it back over the frame. And then that person walks towards me, or I walk towards them, just replacing all the weights, and you're done. And so you can move it off for a portion of the row, or you can move it off of the entire row. It also helps to keep your strawberries clean and to keep animals off of your strawberries. And you can get different thicknesses of fabric, which let in different amounts of light and protect to different degrees of temperature.
Are you removing your hoops at the end of each? I guess it will be in the beginning of spring. Are you removing your hoops, or are you using them?
No, because I also use it for insect netting. So even when I don't, and you can get really, really light agribon that lets like 80%, 85% light through. And then you can protect from like bird droppings, you know, all of these things that we have to consider for produce safety. So if you get bird droppings on your straw and on your strawberries, you really are supposed to flag that and not harvest it.
Right.
You really
Yeah.
are supposed to compost it, right?
Okay.
So if you have the agribon on, then the bird droppings aren't going on the strawberry. And you can simply pull the agribon off, take that section that may be contaminated, wash that and sterilize that. And now you're still using your fabric, and your strawberries haven't been exposed to you know, to the pathogens or to the bird scat.
Okay. I'll have to look it up.
Yeah. And again,
Agribon, where are you ordering it in bulk?
you can buy it at Johnny's.
Oh, okay. That's
And
good.
it's actually not very expensive. And if you're careful with it, it can last you a few seasons. I, unfortunately, this year, like, I don't know, at the end, I was just hauling it out of the field, and it got really dirty and torn in some areas. But ideally, you would treat it with care. And the same frames, you can get them at different heights. So, it's a little more challenging to use it on things that get really high, like tomatoes and cucumbers. At that point, you just want to get a cat tunnel or something that's in the field, some kind of hoop house. I really like cat tunnels because they're like just larger row cover. And you can get different kinds of fabric, one for spring and one for winter or overwintering. And then you can also get insect netting for the height of summer, right? So the insect netting will keep you from getting all hosts of bugs. And you can release things like ladybugs under your row cover to help maintain that. Anybody else have any questions or comments about frost protection or season extension? All right. So again, this goes back to planning, right? These are all of the things that we need to think about and need to enter into our calculations when we are when we're developing our crop plan. So this last frost and first frost determines if you don't have those season extension opportunities, and you're only going to be purchasing enough seed for a season that may last from May until November, right? But if you have season extensions, so you have what are called shoulders on either side of the season, well, then maybe now your season starts in March. You know, maybe you're putting your stuff in March, and you're holding it in the field all the way until December or January. This year, I stopped growing when I was just tired of farming. I was like, you know what? I need a vacation. After New Year, I'm putting everything under Agribon, and whatever is there when I come back in February is what's there. And I just stopped, not because I couldn't grow anymore, just because I didn't want to grow anymore, which is a good problem to have, right? So if you haven't made your sales or distribution goals for the year, if you have sort of shoulders on either side of the typical growing season, now you have an opportunity to actually make more money to make up for whatever you didn't make in the rest of the growing season. And sometimes if it's already in the ground, it's already been maintained, it's already under cover, you will need less labor than you did at the beginning of the growing season to get it in the ground and to get it covered. Does that make sense?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, great. So that's all I've got for this session. We've got about 30 minutes. So I'm open for questions, discussion. As I said earlier, I would really like to hear from you guys so I can take notes on what folks want to get out of this class. And even in the site visit, if there are things that you want me to be mindful of or to know about your site or the information that you want to glean from this, I would be happy to hear about that. So if we want to just sort of open it up for discussion, you guys can talk to each other, you can talk to me. Let's talk about our experiences and what we'd like to see.
Benny, that was great. Thank you. Do you think you could highlight some of the things in the next presentation, part
Yes.
2?
Yeah, definitely. So just going back to the very first slide. Okay. So for the next one, I think that one thing that I am really interested in is giving you guys more information about specific crops, about herbs, about the different varieties that you can choose from and what are some of the pros and cons about that. Introducing folks to growing different crop types. I often have people tell me that it's really hard to grow broccoli or to grow cauliflower or Brussels sprouts. And so helping people in their crop plan to understand what are the specific tasks and what specific information you need to be successful at growing some of those crops. And then also talking about perennials. So asparagus, rhubarb, I really like horseradish, artichokes. What are some of the climatic conditions and cultural conditions required for those specific crops? So understanding how you map your conditions on your site or at your site against choosing specific crops. And then also sharing with you all data collection tools and sheets that are required for just like good agricultural practices. We touched on it briefly, like how you need to manage your field and manage your crop so that you're keeping pathogens off of your crop, and how you can map that against your resources with respect to labor and capital. How you're collecting data about distribution, sales, success of certain crops. So targeting, you'll have your target yields, but how close were you to those target yields? Collecting that data so that it's informing your crop plan year after year. And then how you can, what resources there are to find different crops. So we talked a little bit about different seed companies, but I want to show you what information you can find online so that you understand what are the characteristics of this particular variety. Why am I going to choose a Bolero carrot over an atomic red carrot? What are the days to maturity and what does that mean? And then going over some definitions of information that you kind of need to understand in order to make some of those choices. So we'll delve more into what how you make specific crop choices versus just how you decide who your market is, as we did this time, and how much to plant and how much to seed. So yeah. But I also want to know what people want to know so that I might be able to add that to the information. And I haven't looked at the chat. Okay, so I see that stuff is going into the chat. So herbs for men's health, breastfeeding suggestions, nice. Yeah, I might between now and then I might try some bitter melon. Charmaine, you got to tell me where's the best place to go.
I'd give you 1/10.
You gonna cook some for me?
Why not?
All right, I love it. Yeah, so if there's no more questions, and does anybody want to share sort of I'm interested to know what has brought you all to be interested. What is your inspiration for becoming earth workers and growers and farmers? So we'll go around. Jewel, you talked a little bit about being a lay midwife, but what brought you to wanting to connect the growing of the medicine with providing the support and services?
Great question, Queen. Because I feel like at my maturing age, it's becoming harder and I'm just one person to provide those kind of services. So I wanted to switch gears because I am a doula trainer, which is the proper term is lay midwife. I want to switch gears in education and bridging maternity care with with food justice and nutrition and just like wellness. So I'm just learning in this scope of it and this dynamic of what social justice is and how to integrate that and make a shorter bridge there for me. So if I'm giving a class on like how to make baby food, I want to know like where can a family can go to pick up these, foods. They know it's not it's not GMO, and then they have the nutritional value of properties, right? And knowing how that's going to feed them and nurture them full spectrum, not just about just making this actual baby food, but like nourishing the whole entire family. So I just wanted to dig deeper into like with all the knowledge I have in 20 years of being a lay midwife, I want to just give more and make a deeper connection and just let them know that there are more community resources available more than they think. I used to work for the WIC program years ago, so I also have that knowledge of teaching families how to stretch those checks, and that was one of the first exposures to, what is it, farmers market type of quote unquote experience within, the WIC programming, and I was the peer lactation person there, and so now just kind of like all this time, just bringing it kind of full circle, getting back into like teaching, food demos and like teaching families how to have a proper diet during their pregnancy and lactation, infant feeding, all things. So I just want to operate in different capacities now. And I feel like I could reach more families in educating than it is just someone hiring me to hold space for bringing a baby on Earthside because I'm just one person. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
That is wonderful. That's beautiful. Yeah. Definitely need more of that. There's a lot of people who talk about growing food and creating space to grow food, but it is really an emerging conversation about holding space to grow medicine and understanding that food is a form of medicine, herbs are a form of medicine, just nature is a form of medicine, and being out in the open space. I was at the Sargentsville property 2 days ago, and I was there just as the sun was setting and just taking on in that slow dusk and seeing the moon, and then all of a sudden seeing all these stars. And I had forgotten that I don't see stars until I saw them again. And I just took a moment to just take in all of this light that was revealing itself from the darkness. And it was amazing. It really was. And then I got in the car and I drove back to Jersey City. I didn't see the stars anymore. But just the work that the Food Shed Alliance is doing and other land trusts are doing to preserve that open space and preserve the night sky and fresh air and clean water is really, it's medicine and it's healing. So
thank you for sharing that. That was beautiful.
yeah, so Milani, please tell us what inspired you to take on your acreage and to grow food.
So like a lot of people, it started with the whole COVID time when I was like trapped in the house with kids with nothing to do. So at that time we had a rental house that was on a quarter to a half an acre, so maybe like a third of an acre. And we started going outside and trying little plants and here and there, and then looking at YouTube. And then I don't know if it was like the perfectionist in me or what, just made our family want to like grow more. And it is, my husband is telling me a message. Oh, he's saying it was even before that. But then it was even before that. But that's when we really had started like a huge garden. And then from that point we realized like that we actually enjoyed it. And then you start to see that while it does cost, because like the cost of seeds and the cost of soil and good compost and all those things do add up, it's so enjoyable, and it's a clean family activity that everyone can participate in. And then we just started expanding, and then we were like, let's find a house that we can grow in. And actually at the end of that time also, so I'm like, I love sales, and we would go to Lowe's, and Lowe's would have the fruit trees marked down. So for like a year and a half, maybe 2 years, we would just buy the clearance fruit trees and pot them up. And then when we moved to this house where our acreage is, we came over with over 100 trees.
Wow.
And came in and started putting them in, and we've just been expanding ever since. But
That's beautiful.
yeah, it is, and it's very therapeutic, right? It's definitely great to feel the soil in your hands. And like today was an amazing day.
Yeah.
To even take off of work. I took off a whole day of work just to enjoy the outside and to work outside. And where some wouldn't understand, like, you mean you take off of work to work for free? But yeah, because it's definitely mental healing. It's definitely an amazing space to just be outside and to see the fruits of your labor and touch them with your own hands.
Yeah. Yeah. When you make that connection and you know that it's in your spirit, it is undeniable. I mean, I remember the moment that I realized that this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I went to ag school. I went to ag school because of a trip I took to West Africa, and I took this road from Dakar in Senegal to Nouakchott in Mauritania. There were all these women on the side of the road selling mangoes with their children. And I was with one of my mom's college friends, who I call my aunt. And I was asking, like, well, why is it only women? And why are they all selling mangoes, and who are they selling to? Because we're the only car I've seen on this road like for the past 2 hours. And she talked to me about the separation of women and children from the land when farming became profitable, and the need for agricultural development in the area. And I was like, wow. I'd gone to school for architecture before, and I was like, wow, you know what? That sounds really interesting. I think I want to learn more about that. And that was what inspired me to go to ag school. But it was a moment in one of my fields when I had started my own farm, and I can remember the moment. And I just had my daughter, and I had her strapped to my back, and I was harvesting, and I stopped for a minute, and I remember the feel of the wind across my face, and the stillness in the air, and the solitude and the quiet. And it was the most freeing and liberating feeling I'd ever felt in my life. And I said, I want to do whatever makes me feel like this. This is what I want to do forever. And I've never turned away from farming. I've done other things at the same time, but it has kept me anchored to the land. And I also, I have 3 kids. So we had goats in the backyard and chickens in the backyard, and I had plowed up half of my yard and started planting. So I know the infectious quality of doing homesteading, Nalani. So your story really resonates for me, because it's like, you can't stop. It's like an addiction. But it's also a way to reduce costs. So we would, we had chickens for the eggs, and I would milk those goats twice a day, every day, and make cheese and yogurt. And only thing I couldn't get done was butter. I tried a few times to make goat milk butter, but you need a lot of goat milk. And we would eat out of the backyard. And this was while I was going to ag school, and it greatly reduced the trips I had to make to the grocery store. And I would even use our food scraps to compost, which reduced the cost of some of the inputs. So it can actually save you money over time. Charmaine, you wanna share your come to growing story?
I consider myself a fourth generation farmer because I grew up in Trinidad. So my grandparents were farmers. They have about 17 acres of land that my mom inherited. So they had a cocoa and coffee estate. But now that we're trying to transition it to a coconut estate, and doing small crops there. But that's where I started from. And moving to the US, even though I lived in apartments, I always had tomatoes growing. I always had something growing. And then I moved to the city of Newark and started growing food in the back of my yard, and adopted the garden from the Adopt-A-Lot program, and expanded it where we, give workshops. We teach people how to grow food, how to start seeds, how to cook the food. So it's and so that we increase the health of our community. And this is important to me, that we change the mindset of how people see food and the taste of food, and open up their minds so that they could try different things, because we believe that food is our first source to healing. And the garden giving 1/10 means, for us, it means giving 1/10 of your time. It doesn't have to be financial. It could just be, giving back to the land, giving back to society, just doing something that will improve 1/10 of the world to make the blessings come back to you. So this is my personal experience, and I've always loved touching earth. And I realized like a couple years ago that I was writing a grant, and it was talking about cross-generational molding. And I realized that the experience that I had with my grandparents growing up was something that inspired me now as an adult. And I want to pass this on to my grandkids. So they love being in the space, and it's just, it's a generational thing. And I'm proud to say that I am a farmer, and I don't have any qualms about teaching others or, learning more. And this is why I joined this class tonight.
Wow. That is so beautiful. Yeah, I always like hearing Charmaine's story. I like hearing about how many generations she goes back as a farmer. I love that. Yeah. And that's many of our stories here in the US too. The first urban farmer I knew was my grandfather in Jamaica, Queens. He grew tobacco and corn and potatoes and tomatoes and shell beans and string beans, watermelon. And we'd sit on the porch in Jamaica, Queens, and like shell beans and turnips. He cooked the turnip greens with the turnips in it and a piece of fat back. And yeah, he grew up on a farm in Virginia. We still have the farm in Virginia. They grow tobacco down there, but it's amazing. I like to remember when working in urban areas that, when I was in Oakland, people would often talk in urban ag about introducing people to the idea of farming, but it's not an introduction. It's remembering, right? It's reconnecting, because it's in everyone's roots. Agriculture is a human construct. It's something that humans invented, right? And it's a way of us. I also try to remember that it's a way of us controlling nature. It's not natural. It's a way of controlling nature, which is why also in my crop plans, I always provide some wild space. I have some places on my farm somewhere that I just let it be what it wants to be. If you are in Newark and you go by Hawthorne Avenue Farm, I know last year people were like, what is this crazy woman doing? She's got all these weeds growing all over the farm. But it's a part of my of my acknowledgement that nature has a right to grow and be as much as we have a need to control and manipulate and wrangle nature to get from it what we need. But nature itself has a right to be and exist, even in those spaces that we're utilizing for the production of food or herbs. And it is through that relationship between our built and manipulated world and the natural world that we actually receive some of our true blessings, right? So being able to stumble upon this comfrey plant that just popped up in the field. I recently found in one of the fields, it wasn't mugwort. Oh man, I hate when my mind fails me. But I just stumbled upon this herb that I hadn't even mullein. Found a mullein plant just growing in the middle of one of our fields. And I was like, well, I guess you live here now. And that mullein plant will probably this season get probably 5 feet high, but they'll be mullein. And so just sort of letting a little wildness exist within this managed system that we create when we create these gardens and farms and growing spaces. So we have 6 minutes left. Does anyone have any additional questions for me or anything that you want me to put on the agenda for tomorrow, or any information you'd like me to get for you? I left some information in the chat. These calculators, they come from Johnny's, so it'll take you to the Johnny's website, but I think one of them is actually a PDF, but it takes you directly to the calculator. So you can play around with that. I will also share with Eric so that he can share with everyone the different seed catalogs that I mentioned. And Jewel, I will find some resources for you for herbs. And Nalani, I'll also look for some suppliers for some of the tools and labor-saving technology that I talked about, so that you can look into that and see if any of that works for you. Also, again, trying to network with growers. So if I have a paper pot transplanter, I only need to run it so often. So then also looking at opportunities for tool shares, so that folks don't have to buy, we don't have to have 7 or 8 or 9 different versions of this thing. But if there's ways for us as farmers to collaborate and share resources, tools, seeds, starts, then it makes us all stronger, and it increases the capital we have to invest in our projects.
Abeni, thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
This was so amazing. I appreciate all your time, and I appreciate everybody sharing their stories. It's really, really inspiring. So, as I mentioned, the Food Shed Alliance helps farmers. We feed people through our gleaning program. We protect the environment a lot through our watershed program and the natural farming we encourage in our agricultural partners. We'll share out the recording of this, and we'll also share out via email, even people who registered, all the links that we're gonna put those all together and share them back out. But I really am thankful. I'll put our website, if you're not on our newsletter and you love these kind of talks and educational programming, then get on our newsletter and share. When we share out the recording, share it with friends too. We'd love to have that story spread around. So thank you so much. I appreciate everybody being here tonight.
Thank you all so much, and look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.